Привit and greetings from the center of Kiev. Now, just behind me there, you'll see a new installation. Destroyed or heavily damaged Russian military equipment. It's around day 150 of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And normally this beautiful square, you can see St. Michael's Dome Cathedral behind me. Then you've got a street that leads up to Sophia Cathedral, there at the end of the boulevard. Those two things would normally be the big tourist attractions on a normal late July's evening here in the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. But unfortunately, because of the situation, this is now the main attraction here. And also we have some civilian vehicles that were destroyed by Russian forces when they had, presumably, it's probably from not so far away from here, when Russian forces occupied and attacked the city of Kiev. They occupied obviously parts of it before they were defeated in the Battle of Kiev and retreated. And here we have this eclectic mix of different weapons of death. See some rockets over there. I've been getting a lot of questions either here on YouTube or emails, or guys who want to have consulting calls with me about whether it is safe to come to Ukraine. It's a good idea, basically, to come to Ukraine. Can you do it even? Is it possible? Well, here you see I have come back. I did evacuate on day 2 of the invasion, and now I'm back here in Kiev, and I've been down in Odessa as well. So this video, I just want to give you a short update video about the situation on the ground here in Ukraine, whether you can come, and some things you should consider if you are thinking of doing that.
SAR Experience.
So the first point I'll address is safety. Now obviously this is a country that has been attacked, invaded, but if you're far away from the front line, so away from cities obviously in the east and south of the country, maybe with the exception of Odessa, I'm going to assume that if you're planning to visit Ukraine, it's going to be to one of the big cities like Kiev here, the capital, Odessa, maybe Lviv in the west. Kharkiv is very close to the front line, so that's a very different situation there. You obviously have a risk of shelling and fighting between Russian and Ukrainian troops, so that's obviously not advisable. But if you are here in one of those cities that's away from the front line, then the major risk is, of course, rocket attacks. So when I was down in Odessa, I had one. I took a clip there, shot a clip from my balcony on the morning. That's why I was woken up by, because we have air alerts whenever there is the risk of an incoming missile. So that is a risk, a factor to calculate in. It's obviously something that is low probability to hit you personally, but that's what terrorism does. It makes people fearful everywhere. We saw what happened in Kremenchuk, to the shopping center, also in Vinnytsia during the middle of the day. It could have been just right here. People walking around. And if you are coming, definitely download on your phone the app from the Ukrainian government that allows you to select where you are and get the latest air alerts, so that basically you'll have one that will go on. Make sure that you know where there is a shelter nearby if you are concerned and you want to go to a shelter, and then it tells you when the alert is off. So you get that normally a few times a day. So next up is the price level here in Ukraine. There's obviously a war. Many people would imagine that things are a lot cheaper, but then again, we have so much inflation in the world. So what is the situation here on the ground compared to pre-February 24th invasion? Well, when I was going to make this video originally a day or two ago, the situation was a little bit different, because at the time, the official exchange rate was about 30 to 1, so 30 hryvnia to $1, €1. The euro and the dollar close to parity at the moment. And then when you came here on the street, I noticed that the exchange rate was basically 36 to 1, 37 to 1. So there was a big difference, like 20% better exchange rate if you actually came with cash in hand, as opposed to using your card, which uses the official exchange rates basically. And that has changed. Yesterday, Ukraine allowed the exchange rate to go down about 25%. So now it's closer to the actual real exchange rate that you will find here in the ground. So probably you don't need to worry as much about bringing cash. There isn't going to be as big a saving. There's going to be a little bit of an advantage still to change in your cash when you're here, but not the massive difference that there was a couple of days ago. So with that in mind, well, as you can see, it's already about, yeah, it's going to be whatever, about 25-30% cheaper probably for you than it was pre-war. And there is a little bit of inflation maybe. I didn't notice super amount in the shops or in the restaurants. Maybe there's like a 10% inflation. So maybe, yeah, maybe that brings it down a little bit, but we're definitely at least 20% cheaper than pre-war on most things, just in general. Now, accommodation, as you would imagine, big tourist cities like Lviv, Odessa, here in Kiev, well, there are almost no international tourists at the moment. So that means that the kind of Airbnb and hotel sector, things are about half price, I would say, compared to a normal high season, because we're at the end of July here. In terms of places being able to get things in the shops, I didn't notice a massive difference. There are a few things that seemed a little bit scarcer than before that are imported, but there isn't a massive difference, at least here in Kiev and Odessa. Restaurants are open, most of them, that from before. Cafes, I would say 80% of them are open in the center. Same with bars, because there is a curfew at 11 p.m., but yeah, they're open during the day. I'm actually about to walk past an aperitivo bar here, and they're doing aperitivo. People are doing it at 5:30 as opposed to later, because, you know, if everybody has to be off the streets by 11 p.m., then yeah, the place have to close probably around 9:30, 10 o'clock at the maximum. I guess one positive, if you are used to coming here, is there are no hordes of horny guys, or the kind of sex tourist brigade. They are definitely scared off by the war, so you see very few tourists here. And maybe for some of you that's also something to consider as a plus. I mean, you get to come to Kiev and Odessa in a time when there are no international tourists, but as you see here, there are still plenty of people around in the center. And that brings me to my next big question that I get asked about is, do you need a visa to come to Ukraine at the moment? Well, the immigration laws are, for most people, exactly the same as before. If you had visa-free before the war, so if you're American, a EU citizen, a Brit, a Canadian, most countries in the West, most of Latin American countries as well, they have visa-free for 90 days every 180 here in Ukraine. If you have a Russian visa, Russian stamps in your passport, is that going to be an issue here in Ukraine? Well, I'm going to tell you about my own experience, an experience of a friend who I was having a shisha with last night, and he has also Russian stamps in his passport, also Belarusian stamps on passports. No problem in my experience, or anyone I have heard of, except one person who happens to be a YouTuber, Ben from the channel Bald and Bankrupt. He made a video saying that he was not allowed into Ukraine because he had a Russian visa. So that's what he said was his experience at the border. Now, you have to remember that in his case, he has a Russian work visa, and he has obviously his job is being on YouTube, which is a bit strange to have a 3-year work permit from Russia. And he has a brand built on, let's call it Soviet nostalgia. Going around and talking about old Soviet things, and Soviet symbols are illegal here in Ukraine, and they have been used by some of the occupying forces in south and east of Ukraine. So the Russian occupiers have used many Soviet symbols, even though today Russia is definitely not communist, but they use them as kind of a progression between the Russian Empire and today when they're occupying in an imperialistic quest parts of Ukraine. On top of that, he has traveled around, been to Russia quite a bit, filmed there, and he made many comments on social media that follow the Russian narrative, complaining about Western influence in Ukraine, and basically when he came here at the beginning of just before the invasion, pushing a lot of narratives about Russia Today, Russia's propaganda channel. Then he went off during the war to make a video in Syria, obviously with the acquiescence of the Assad regime, which is pro-Russian, and there were very bad diplomatic relations between Ukraine and Syria at the moment, because Syria has recognized Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic as independent. And he made a video there in Aleppo, a city that was heavily damaged by Russian shelling at one point during their war. And something similar was happening in Mariupol here in Ukraine at the same time. So you put all those things together, and the Ukrainians decided that he wasn't going to come in when he went to the border. I've been actually at that border since the invasion began with my passport, immigrant passport, and I didn't have any issues. Actually, they were pretty friendly to me at the border. I think for everyone else, I haven't heard any issues if you actually just have a tourist stamp on your visa for Russia. I doubt that would be a big issue. I should say, just as the last point, that visa-free for Russians has been cancelled since the invasion started, but that's probably not a huge surprise considering that they invaded the country, that they no longer have their 90 days every 180, but everyone else should be fine. Just as a final point, I want to just say that, of course, maybe this is common sense. You need to check the latest travel advice. Before the war, there were a lot of people saying it's all Western hysteria, Russia isn't going to invade. I had a more measured approach to it. Definitely check the latest travel advice before you come here, and just be aware of what the potential risk level is and make an informed judgment. Stay safe wherever you are, and if you are coming to Ukraine, do your best to support the country in its time of need, because this invasion has to be ultimately defeated, and Russia needs to leave and go home, back to its country. Their troops need to leave and go back to Russia, and as soon as possible. So Slava Ukraini, Horom Slava, do pobачення from Kiev, capital of Ukraine.
SAR Experience.
And just finally, if you are interested in more bespoke advice about coming to Ukraine or other issues in the region, down below in the description to this video is a link to my consulting. We can set up a consulting call and you will get to tap into my over 10 years of experience in this region. If that's for you, just go down below and we will speak very soon.